Ostensibly, the gospel is about the physical end of the world. The powers of the heavens will be shaken. Everything will be burnt up. Well, interestingly enough, modern astronomy and astrophysicists, say that is in fact what's going to happen. In however many billion years, the sun's going to become a red giant and then burn up the whole Earth. So maybe that's when the end of the world will be. I mean, if we last that long, us as a species, that's in doubt. Or also, they say, well, the Big Bang started it, the universe is expanding, and then some say eventually it'll come back in a big crunch, and that will be the end of the universe. Okay, maybe, but there's certainly a deeper meaning, one that's more applicable to us today in what Jesus is saying. Now remember, did you catch that line? He said, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Really? Now, unless we say that Jesus, since it says Jesus in his human nature, even the Son doesn't know when this is happening, and he perhaps believed, as his disciple Paul clearly did, that the second coming, the end of the world, would happen in his own generation, literally, unless we say that. Or rather, even if we say that, there's still a much deeper mystical interior meaning to these words that we must heed. And that is that our inner world must be shaken. The powers of our heaven, the powers of our minds and hearts and souls must be shaken. Our lights have to go out. The sun and the moon that we refer to are that we take serious security, and these things have to die in order for us to rise, for the Son of Justice, for the second coming, for Jesus to appear on the clouds as he truly is. So many of our ideas, concepts, systems, devotions have to be relativized or go through purgation. Now, certainly one of the most obvious, I hope most obvious, ways in which ideas of God have to be purged and the lights have to go out and the powers have to be shaken is this God of violence that we've just seen in Paris a few days ago and so many other times. God, or violence done in the name of God. And wow, human beings love that. Wow, they can take all their anger and hatred and frustration and sanction it with God. Wow, how convenient. And you can do whatever you want in the name of God. Any violence in the name of God is a blasphemy. Any violence at all in the name of any God is a blasphemy. Which is exactly what Pope Francis said this morning in Rome. The very word he used is blasphemy, because that is not who God is. So anytime there's violence in the name of God, it's blasphemous and it's idolatrous and it's a travesty. And not just Islam, obviously. We've got a plenty good history, plenty horrible history of violence in our own tradition. Inquisitions, crusades, all these things in the name of God. And isn't this continuing today? In subtler or not so subtle ways. Violence against Muslims. Violence against Jews or Palestinians. Violence against women. Violence against blacks. Violence against gays in God's name. Violence against the environment. Violence against helpless life in all its forms. None of this is God. And this is the greatest travesty of all. So that kind of God has to die. But there are even subtler levels, other levels of this. What, for example, the kind of religiosity, quotes, which underlies the violence so often. I was less than 2 miles away from Ground Zero at 9/11. I was stationed at St. Joseph's Church in Greenwich Village, saw the whole thing. And my homily that following Sunday was about how fanaticism and fundamentalism in whatever tradition has to be fought and resisted, or this kind of thing is going to happen. A certain vision of God that has to be purified, has to die. A few years ago, there was a front page article in the Times Magazine about a theologian for radical Islam, Wahhabism, I forget the name of the person, but it was very famous work in which he chastised the West and raised real issues. He said, how can you consider yourself devout? How can you consider yourself religious when you have secularism and all over the place? We stand up for something more pious. And the Times actually said, well, it's a good case. So what would we answer? Well, here's an answer. Secularity is the only way of life which is truly respectful of religion. I repeat, secularity is the only way of life which truly respects and is adequate to religion. Why do I say that? First of all, because it's the only way that guarantees freedom. Freedom of religion. Arguably the most important spiritual, religious document of the 20th century, from a political point of view, certainly, is the document of the Second Vatican Council on religious freedom, which was amazing even in our own tradition to have this come out, which it says that no one can impede religious practice and no one can impose religious practice. Which is why our own founding fathers, after centuries of senseless, bloody religious war, separated the church and state. We need a state of freedom in which everyone is free to worship or not as they wish. That's why we need a secular society. It's too dangerous otherwise. Religion, states with one religion, whether Afghanistan or Israel or some Christian nation, are dangerous because they may not permit that kind of religious freedom. So we have to examine that kind of imposition of religious practice. And the fanaticism and fundamentalism very often follows where every minor detail of daily life is corseted, straitjacketed by this or that rule about what you have to wear or what you can or can't do or what you have to drink or eat or not eat or drink or alcohol or whatever it might be, which is absurd. That kind of God is too small, too petty, too micromanaging. I'm astounded, even it happens in any tradition, including Catholicism, in its own way, where we seem to identify particular religious practices or thought systems or customs or culture, religious culture, with the absolute itself, with the divine itself, which is its own kind of blasphemy. No practice, no matter how pious or well-founded, is adequate to the mystery of the infinite God. That's also why secularity is the only proper way to live. No incarnation or embodiment of any religious system or thought or culture is adequate to the mystery of God. You need that freedom to explore and leave open the possibilities. That's why when the terrorists go in with their guns shouting, Allahu Akbar, God is great. Not that God. That God is a sham, is a travesty, is too tiny, micromanaging everything. Especially the freedom we need to explore the mystery of God in our own lives. The mystery of the universe, of a God who can create things like this, which don't fit into expectations. Believe it or not, Chancellor Merkel of Germany seemed to put it best yesterday when she said, look how they attacked people who were having fun, who were at bars and restaurants and stadium and concert hall, attacking people who wanted to live a life of freedom in a city that celebrates life. And all they met were murderers who hate that freedom of life. Exactly. You hate life, you hate freedom. This doesn't fit into your narrow categories, into your customs, into your fearful, closeted expectations. That's not God. It's just our fear and our arrogance. And let me give you, bring it home, let me give a fairly harmless example of what I'm talking about, of identifying religious culture with the absolute, but from our own tradition. When I was in the monastery for many years, couple of decades, as you may know, we lived a hermit life in a cottage, and before we entered the main chamber where we slept and ate and studied and prayed, there's a small antechamber, which is empty. It's called the Ave Maria, Hail Mary, the words which are up there. It's dedicated to Mary. And there was a prie-dieu, maybe an icon of Mary from the Eastern Church, but the main image or symbol of Mary was the emptiness, the openness, the complete lack of a priori. As if we have to pass through, like the womb, the utter openness of Mary to enter into our spiritual life. And we said the office of Mary every day. So when I came back to the world and saw this devotion to Mary, I was a little startled, a little shocked even. Do we think that's Mary? Do we imagine Mary as actually up in heaven, in a white gown with a blue veil and holding a rosary and swooning in devotion? Really? Do we think that's Mary? Really? It's a feeble approximation. It's a far cry reflection of the immense, unutterable beauty and majesty of Mary, who's shining like the sun, shining like the firmament. Nothing is adequate to that. We can't take too seriously. I mean, those statues can be helpful, they can be very beautiful. The iconography is meant to symbolize various things, which are quite valid. But don't be duped, thinking this is actually the reality. Not even close. And don't even get me started on a man with a beard and a guy with a cross and a bird as the Trinity. But as long as, in whatever tradition, we cling to our thought systems and moral systems and devotional systems and cultural expectations and cultural expressions as if they were absolutes, then we're going to have a series of religions caught in their tribalism and competition and belief systems and belonging systems that are going to be warring with each other incessantly until we blow one another up, long before the sun in the sky blows us up. Well, this is relativism. It sounds too much like relativism. Yes, it's relativism. Everything that's manifested in this world is relative. Nothing is absolute. Only God is absolute. All these things can point, but they're never the reality itself. So we have to have the sun go out and the moon go out and the stars be shaken and the heavens be shaken in our inner world before we're adequate to the coming of the Son of Man. As he really is. Not as we imagine him or want him to be. Okay. Now, unless you think I'm just blathering on because I'm some kind of liberal, what do you think we mean in our tradition, our mystical tradition, by the dark night of the soul of St. John of the Cross? or the great crises of faith in the lives of some of the saints like Therese of Lisieux over there, or Mother Teresa in our own time that you've heard about, her trials. What do we think we mean? What I submit we mean is that the lights went out. All the convenient ideas and systems of God and faith systems that they had, the light had to go out. Their own sense of their moral dignity or whatever had to go out. None of it was adequate to the reality. It had to be purged, very painfully. But that's the price. Goethe Dämmerung, final opera of Wagner's trilogy, Twilight of the Gods. Many commentators submit that that was mainly what Wagner was talking about or writing about. The gods were dying. Our two little gods in the 19th century that didn't survive the scientific revolution or the moral revolution or the psychological revolution, they had to die. God is dead, Nietzsche proclaimed. Yes, fortunately, that God had to die. What God survives? At the last synod, one of the cardinals got up and said, well, you know, the gays today, they're just like the Nazis were in the 20th century. Was that so? You know what I think is like the Nazis in the 20th century? Statements like that. So what survives that the Son of Man can truly come? This generation must not pass away. You must not pass away before all these things are accomplished in you and in me. So that we can finally shine like the sun in the kingdom of the Father, like the firmament and the stars in heaven. But our own stars and our own firmament have to come down, tumbling down first. And then we can perhaps understand, or not grasp, but be grasped by the mystery that we finally surrendered to, like Mary did in the Annunciation, completely open to the surprises, the God of surprises, as Pope Francis keeps calling him, who came to announce something absolutely unimaginable, and because she was so empty and free of a priori, she accepted it. Or Jesus, who, as we heard in the second reading, who came and died and rose for us, which is what we have to do, die and rise. His message brought him way beyond the practices of what was acceptable of his God-given religion in Judaism. And they killed him for it. And the empires of the world, the Roman Empire, whatever other empire, killed him for it. Because God is infinite. He can't be cramped into our little systems, political or religious, much less into our own little individual minds. So let it be blown open. Let your heavens be shaken. And finally you will shine like the stars. And you will know, as the psalm today ends by saying, show me the paths of life. Fullness of joy in your presence. Life at your right hand forever.